Hello and welcome to part 2. In this section we're going to be talking a little bit more about Peter Paget. If you haven't watched part 1, it might be a good idea that you do, because there are going to be some stances I take which you're not going to quite understand if you don't see it in context. So, on we go, because we've got a lot to cover. Peter says that he felt at times that corporate protection interests and things like that were trying to shut down his cancer message, but targets that he was being asked to look into, like animal rights activists, anti-nuclear protesters, union members and some MPs, he says he tried to take an ethical stance on this work, declining politely any unethical missions. Very vague. I mean, you know, what is unethical or not? I mean, he's not being more specific than that. Anyway, won't dwell on that. But I think his crisis of conscience is just for his book, really, based on some of the things he says later on about his word and say so having got people assassinated. I think that, you know, he's not actually that worried. I think it's all crocodile tears to appear like he's got some sort of soul in there. But yeah, he openly admits to infiltrating groups, dressing up, speaking in the same manner, acting like a mirror image of the group in question, and that this could act for months, he says, as it takes time for data to collect. And my point in this is basically then, you know, he's an infiltration agent, an agent provocateur, somebody who will go in, find dirt, sling the dirt. And he believes himself to be an excellent candidate for this undercover work. You know, he had long hair, dressed a bit unconventionally, you know, he wrote fringe books, so he says. And but basically, my point is, you know, he broke confidences with people in the UFO community every step of the way by feeding information back to his bosses. I mean, it's very disrespectful the way he was operating. And then he goes on to say, you know, if the powers that be, whoever they were, wanted someone or a group taken down, they would just ask him to go looking for dirt, misdemeanors, or anything that could be used in a suitable character assassination or negative PR. To isolate them and alienate them from the general public, you know, and make the general public dislike their views. So, I mean, basically, he's a slimeball, agent provocateur. I don't know why people give him the time of day trying to admit to this stuff in a book. He was saying that he spent time with Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut who landed on the moon. He was obviously doing some sort of infiltration into him, by the sounds of it. And he says that Edgar Mitchell told him that he had all his teeth broken off and then filed down to the roots. And the other astronauts did too, so they didn't have any problems on their journey in space. But this sounds complete nonsense, because if you look on the internet, NASA say that that's a known myth, and there's no truth in it at all. Then you've got the point of why would you do something like that for somebody who's going to the moon and back, which is not like you're in space for years. It's not like you're in space for months. You're in space for a week. Yeah? Is there really that much urgency, you know, with a dental matter? No. And NASA say on the internet as well that, you know, people have said things like they've taken people's pancreases out and gallbladders, you know, as a precautionary measure. No. These people have good medicals before they get on a spacecraft, and they pretty much would know if there were going to be any problems. They'd know if the teeth were on the edge of falling apart. They would have x-rayed, things like that. You know, these people were fighting fit, otherwise they wouldn't have been sent on the missions. So for Peter Paget to say this, I mean, you know, without even checking it out, I mean, it's just laughable. I'm sure Edgar Mitchell would be quite dismayed, and probably turning in his grave because he's no longer alive, if he knew that he was being spied on by somebody in the office next door, which Paget says was him. Not very nice to find something like that out, is it? Here we go again. He just decided to rent a Victorian converted stone barn set atop the high cliffs of Bigbury Bay overlooking the picturesque Burgh Island. Now, I actually went and did an interview with Peter at his house there, so I can confirm he did live in this place. I didn't know how he came to be there, but a rented Victorian stone barn like that, you're talking probably, in excess of 1,000, maybe up in even the 2,000 a month for a place like that to rent. And one has to ask, where does he get all this money from? I mean, the average pay for somebody who's on the payroll of MI5 is about 50,000 a year, and I just don't think he would have had the money. Bearing in mind, he says that he wasn't actually working for MI5 by this point any longer, and he was just contract work. So where all this money comes from is quite an amazing thing, But then again, maybe he ran up a lot of bills which he didn't pay, which seems a common theme for people in the UFO community to be a little bit wide of the mark with some of their claims, and possibly living outside their means. Lots of waffle. He talks about being a handler for a number of agents in the orbit of London mosques, and these agents would mingle and merge in the prayer meetings. Now, being a handler is a fairly high role, looking after agents in the field, so it seems that sometimes he is a handler and sometimes he is being handled. So he's not exactly clear, but here you can see that he is trying to get undercover information which can be used against these organizations. So, this is pretty much what he does. But the thing is, he doesn't seem to have any problem with handling going around Muslim mosques, but he seems to have a problem with things like environmental campaigners and things like that. So obviously doesn't think very much of Muslims then. And here we go again. He said that when he was tasked in these roles, he was quite interested in any dirt that could be found: marital problems, affairs, sexual peculiarities, political connections, any other people that these targets hung out with, information about those other people, all these sorts of things, being reported back up the line, which you have to ask sometimes, do these government people have a right to know this? And by his own testimony, he says that the people who do these jobs and report this information back up the line, they don't often know why they're doing it, and they don't often know the full extent of why this information is being gathered. They simply do it, and then it becomes useful to somebody else. So for all that anyone would know, you think you're doing something fairly harmless, and it might be something like a political campaign, a smear campaign against somebody. And, you're finding out all the information about who they sleep with and what they're doing and all that in order for somebody to nobble a vote, nobble an MP or a campaigner or a an animal activist or something like that. All these things which you think would be allowable in a democratic society, and you've got these paid agents going out there trying to screw it all up. So basically, when you think you're free in society to do what they tell you and to be shit on. When the time comes when they say it's now necessary for you to be taken down, they've got all the information on you. Again, this is disgraceful behaviour in a civilised society. He says he studied for a degree in computer science at Birmingham, so I'd like to see the degree certificate, please. Or just information about the year that you were there so we can go and check. He says that a chap was going to try and get into a nuclear command centre underneath Salisbury Plain. And by the description, it sounds like as if he's talking about me. But he says that this chap wanted to take 200 activists and try and gain access to this underground base, which is crazy because, let's face it, if you tried to get into any military facility, especially somewhere with command and control of nuclear missiles, do you think you're going to get through the door? Do you think you're going to get through the big safe vault doors that they have to protect these places? These people are armed. They have weapons. What, and just 200 activists are going to just like force their way in there and just walk in. And he says that, and I was going to try and start World War III with nuclear launch codes that I had. Where would I have got nuclear launch codes from? And why would I want to start nuclear war? Why would I want to start World War III? A bit self-defeating there, isn't it? I think it'd be an end of life on the planet, which would include my life. Not something I really, generally on a average day think about, So where he gets this type of stuff from, I do not know. But it seems, quite wild and fantasized. I just hope that there aren't factions inside the military. If this were true, and I don't believe it is, I just hope that there wouldn't be people who would believe such stupid stuff as that. But there you go. Okay, here we are. A very important point is that he says that he was tracking down some agents who could possibly have some sort of dirty bomb that they were going to try and set off in the UK. And he managed to identify these parties involved, and subsequently he says they never went home, which by that you would tend to think that means that they were assassinated. So rather than being tried before a court, which is how you think things are meant to be done, on British soil, what he's kind of suggesting is when somebody's a little bit of a threat like that, we just kill them. Which kind of flies in the face of everything else that you think this country is set up to do and be about, but there we are. And he was part of that, and seems like because he's telling us that took place, if it were true, he would be probably telling us the names of these people, wouldn't he? In order to create an investigation. Well, if he's not, then what's the point? Because, it's like suggesting that somewhere, at some time, something really bad was done by the military to someone, and it was terrible, and I can't tell you anything about it, but there you go. It's useless, really, isn't it? It's like, now we're getting into Peter Paget and assassinations, and it's, but it still doesn't add up to anything. It's just like hot air. Peter Paget claims that it's very important to not be identified. And he said if he would have been identified, that is not the way it's done with intelligence. You keep your people in place and out of sight, unidentified at all costs, otherwise your intel source has dried up. And yet, here he is, writing a book, telling people all about what he did, and he claims to be a dedicated intelligence officer, that has lots of best interests at heart. But, it's kind of unravels his position and may compromise things he did in the past if he's recognised for what he was doing by people. So I can't say that he seems like he's a very loyal intelligence officer, because a really loyal intelligence officer wouldn't be writing a book. Here's a little bit where his writing style is so bad. He says, "Ours is to only do and die, comma, ours but to do and die." Now I think I've heard the correct phrase that he's trying to use here, but I don't think he's actually really reread his book properly, and I don't think anybody else has read his book properly and kind of flagged this up. But it doesn't make any sense. It's gibberish. So here we go again, and no, I'm not making any mistakes, right? This is how it reads. "Ours is only do and die, ours but to do and die." Ours is to only do and die, ours but to do and die. Doesn't make any sense. Peter claims that the Titanic was actually the RMS Olympic, and that there was a switch out done so that the RMS Olympic was swapped for the Titanic, and that was put down instead. So, well, And Peter tells us, very matter of fact, that the Egyptian pyramids were built on resonance functions, and granite has piezoelectric properties if vibrated, and can play back like a record player. And, you can even get crystals to sing and glow. I've never seen a crystal glow, and I've never seen a crystal sing. But I'm going to go and Google that now and see what we find. I wonder whether I'll find anything. Oh, Peter says that apparently the B-2 bombers have got high voltage technology employed in them, which has come out of Area 51, and this basically switches electrons from the front of the wing to the back of the wing, which then gives thrust. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of aircraft engineers out there who've worked on the B-2 bomber over the years, and I don't remember hearing anybody talking about this one. So straight out of the mouth of Peter Paget for the very first time, and he also states that the stealth bomber must be overhauled every 10 hours or 10 flights. So every 10 hours they overhaul and repaint all of the reflective coating, the special radar reflective coating. So it has to be completely repainted. No, complete bollocks. Apparently, overhauling a stealth bomber is only done every 7 years, and it costs 60 million. And it has to be taken out of service for 1 whole year whilst they do it. So, where Peter gets this stuff from, nobody knows. Peter seems to suggest that he has a pilot's license. I would like to see it, because I know what a pilot's license looks like. Can we see your pilot's license, please, Peter? Peter claims he was put on to the case of investigating the death of TV presenter Jill Dando. Don't see any evidence of that, apart from, he says that he was interested in it. Well, great, isn't it? He does exactly the same thing with Diana. He's like, I was put on to the case of Diana. I decided to put myself on the case. It's like, how much of this is being, assigned to the case, or him having a personal interest and feeling like, maybe he should be looking into it, in his, I'm a police officer when I'm not really a police officer. I mean, maybe he feels like he's a MI5 intelligence officer when he's not really. He just thinks he is, and thinks he must be serving the country and investigating stuff. Maybe this guy's a real Walter Mitty. Peter talks about working with Special Branch, that his handler told him that he was considered rather exceptional. Well, for an exceptional person working as an agent, he hasn't mentioned anywhere in this book so far that he's had any training in investigation, that he's had any military training, self-defense training, arms training. But yet there he is, out there doing his thing. So why are we not told about the obvious training that you would need to have, and before you would be sent out into the field? Why no mention of this? Another wild claim. He says that he had to work around cult types in a sect in Italy where they had dug a huge underground city by hand. Yes, by hand, he says. And they got picked up by the local mayor, who fancied turning into a local tourist attraction, right? Why can't he name this? Yeah? Why is he got to be so vague? I have not been able to dig up anything on an Italian underground city that was dug by a bunch of cultists and sectists. Yeah? And why is it being described as a city? Because, that would imply something like London or Bristol. They dug with their own hands something the size of Bristol underneath an Italian town or city. They dug one of their own of equal size. Just a bunch of cultists, a small group of people. Anything about that story just sound a little bit possibly implausible? I can understand them maybe you know, digging out a couple of rooms and a couple of tunnels, maybe a long escape tunnel or something like that, you know. But a city? Peter, I think you need to think. Engage brain before opening mouth or typing on keyboard. Yeah? And I would still very much like to know what you're talking about and where this is, please. Because it doesn't represent any security risk if you tell us that, does it? Paget reckons that Osama bin Laden's real name was Tim Osman, or Osman. And he'd even visited the White House. He's, you know, Osama bin Laden's been all through the White House, according to Paget. Yep. Now this next one is an absolute classic. I kid you not. Peter Paget excels himself here. Peter says that the Twin Towers, World Trade Center, 911, remember those two big buildings in New York that came down? Well, he says that they were both taken down independently, obviously, by two, not just one, but two suitcase nuclear bombs, which were made from modified nuclear warheads, he says. And he even names them. He says they're W-54, modified nuclear warheads. Even the Israelis had these suitcase bombs, apparently. But what he says, which is kind of, you know, a diversion from common sense and maybe reality, is that somehow these bombs fired upwards. I've never heard of anyone in history describing a freestanding nuclear device as anything other than exploding out in all directions. But Peter then goes on to say that the suitcase bomb vaporized the center of the Twin Towers. Now, every nuclear bomb that I have learnt about or seen tends to explode in all directions, and it tends to be quite a large explosion. So one would imagine that if a nuclear bomb was put inside a building, the first thing you would see would be the building going outwards at high speed. And say, for example, let's just to be absolutely retarded, let's say Peter's scenario was right, and that the middle of the one of the buildings would have vaporized. Then surely that means that if you take out the center bit here, that's gone now. Then above it, you've got free floating in thin air, you've got the rest of a building, which is then going to come down into the position of the vaporized area, hit the building underneath, and the two either splay outwards or continue to go downwards and splay outwards. Now, where was that on any of the video footage that was shot of the event? Where is this nuclear explosion? Yeah, where is this vaporization of the center of the building? You know, and it collapsing in that manner. Where is this? Now, Peter claims to be keen on his physics, but yet he obviously hasn't heard of something very basic called EMP, electromagnetic pulse, which is present in a nuclear explosion. And it will knock out for many miles, sometimes in some cases, like the experimental test they did in the 1950s to test EMP, they found that this went for about, I think it was 1,000 kilometers. So, you know, it's a large area that is affected by an electromagnetic pulse. Now, what does that do? It means everything from digital watches, mobile phones, computers, you know, anything, telephones, anything electrical, fried, including the power grid would be fried. And did anybody report this? Did the police report that they could no longer use their radios? Or did the fire service say, oh no, our network went down because all our radios wouldn't work and our fire trucks wouldn't work anymore and we couldn't drive around because our cars wouldn't work anymore? Yeah? Did anyone report anything like that? No. It's absolute nonsense. Plus, if there had been a nuclear explosion, there's a little thing called radiation. Just a little thing called radiation, Peter. Yes? The dust created from that nuclear explosion would be present in people's lungs, would be in dust that would have blown around the streets. And anyone with a Geiger counter could have gone up to somebody who had been in that area, and they would have got a big reading from just holding it up against somebody's chest or at the ground or anywhere where this dust would have fallen. Did anybody report any radioactive residue of any kind like that in New York after this event? So where is Peter getting this bullshit from? Where's he getting it from? And why is he passing it off as good information in his book? I mean, this is just like gaga, goo goo gaga territory, isn't it? He then goes on to say that if you put your phone in a tin box and close the lid, that it's then a Faraday cage, so it lets no signals in or out. Well, that isn't necessarily true, because the tin box is metal, and metal can itself act as an antenna. So if you put a transmitter inside a box, it can sometimes use the box as part of the transmitter. And it can sometimes receive signals in as well. So it's not an absolute guaranteed thing that it will kill signals. So more evidence of hokey physics understanding from Peter. He then goes on to claim that he has an RFID chip in him from the military, which allows them to track him. I think he means from space, basically, so they know where he is at all times. And he says it's a bit like in the Men in Black films, where all the aliens are tracked in a central control room to make sure none of them are going over the wall. Well, it didn't. They obviously didn't have one in Edward Snowden then, did they? Because they didn't seem to know where he was. Didn't stop him going to the Soviet Union after his whistleblowing. Pete, come on. You say you got an RFID chip in you, and it's a military special super grade one. Yeah. Any proof of that? Could we possibly take an X-ray of it and scan it to see what it is? Would that be possible? Because there you are, you see you have a piece of evidence in you that proves you are a super spy. So can we see it, please, considering you're quite happy to tell us that you've got it? Oh, he also says that his RFID, like many others out there, can be used to control people. That you can send you special signals and control your mind, and he talks about this as very matter of fact, but actually it's just the stuff of science fiction. None of this stuff has ever been practically demonstrated, and it's just the domain of conspiracy theorists and people with mental problems who can hear voices in their head. It's their RFID chip, it's in my shoulder. No, it doesn't show up on an X-ray, but it is in there. Honest, governor. The line is very blurred between what Peter Paget writes in this book and what I believe is just stuff that's out there in the public domain in the conspiracy camps. He talks about HAARP, the High-Powered Active Auroral Research Project, which was done in Alaska, and he says that this is a weather modification system. Yet there are plenty of conspiracy theories about that, but nothing practical at all to say that the weather has ever been modified by the use of HAARP. I mean, its primary purpose was to test whether or not you could resonate the ionosphere in order to do VLF communications. I don't think there's anything else to say that it has done anything else. But I mean, it's just one of those conspiracies, isn't it? You can say the Earth is flat, and there'll be some people out there that'll believe it. But I'm just surprised that Peter is going with a lot of this really weak nonsense to pad out and fluff out his book with basically things that aren't his. They can't be his personal experience, and really only do a lot to weaken everything he's trying to say about his own story. And if you can't believe that the Twin Towers were taken down by nukes, But what does it say about the rest of his story? That's the problem, isn't it? Really, that is the problem with Peter and his story.
Say what?
Now this is where things shift gear slightly, because Peter then says that he was taken out of being an active Her Majesty's government operative, and he was then working as a subcontractor, so basically self-employed, and this gave Her Majesty's government complete deniable responsibility. Well, they've got that anyway, haven't they? Because they don't really comment about things that go on in the intelligence services anyway, so they're pretty much covered. But nonetheless, he says that it was about this time that he was writing his own memoirs, and he was looking after other special forces and intelligence staff people in his safe houses that he ran out there. And whilst he was doing this, some of them wanted to start writing their memoirs as well. So the funny thing is here that now you've got a man who is basically, for no apparent reason, writing a book which could probably end up being banned, that he's going to identify himself as being a government agent, which is very much not allowed, and he's helping other people to write their memoirs so they can do the same thing. How do you think that would go down if it were true? I think like a lead balloon.
Why would you do that?
And would they continue to still want to have anything to do with you, or be in any way, shape or form handing you down work, if they knew this was the case? Duh. In the middle of all this, there's a little snippet he puts in here, which I think is him trying to kind of allow wriggle room for his kind of the benefits fraud that he was involved in. And he says that when you have an avatar, which is a alternate persona that you use as an agent, your secret name, your secret identity, that these need to be maintained by their creators over a period of years and not just a few days or weeks. So I think this is his way of saying, well, if I'm pretending to be all these people and they've all got lots of different identities, then I need to claim benefits on all of them, don't I? Not necessarily. Why would you need to even claim benefits on any of them? Maybe one, but three, and then wouldn't you give that money back? Because you don't actually need it, because you're claiming it just to keep these characters' identities alive. So you wouldn't need to keep the money, would you? You'd really hand it back. That would seem to make sense, wouldn't it? It's like saying, oh, I'm a secret agent working for the police, and we think somebody's going to steal some gold. So in order to become part of their group, I'll have to go and break into a bank so that they think I'm a bank robber. But it's okay, because I can keep all the money myself from that bank job. Yeah, Pete, that's how it sounds, mate. That's the same sort of kind of, you're keeping the profits from an illegal act, and your handlers are not going to say anything about that. It doesn't make sense, mate. It doesn't work like that.
The foolishness of that comment is so deep, I can only ascribe it to higher education. You have to have gone to college to say something that stupid.
Peter talks about running a place for these SAS and army people, people who are involved in intelligence. And he says, oh, they all need some R&R. But the thing is, it's like, if you're going to have an R&R place, then that would imply that there's going to be a level of discretion and secrecy, that you're not going to go blabbing about what's going on there or attracting attention to yourself. And as we'll see in a bit, that isn't what Peter does in his place he runs for R&R for the spooks. Now, here's the problem. You're running a hotel or a guest place for spooks, and you're out in the sticks and nobody knows you're there, and you'd like to keep it that way. They don't know what you're up to. You're just private individuals. They leave you alone. That's fine. What you don't want to do is really go waving any really big red flags above your head, is it? But this is what Peter does next. he was in his local town nearby to the establishment, and he saw some people that he thought might be suspicious, and they were hanging around their cars in kind of like misbehaving and looking like they were the types of people who might be breaking into cars or might possibly be stealing things and causing mayhem in that town. And he thought that they were Romanians. And because he didn't like them and took a disliking to them and thought that they might be criminals, he thought the best thing I can do here is to pull out a big camera with a long lens, but then sit in front of them and take photos of them, letting them know that, look at me. They could see him taking photos, letting them know that he was taking photos of them so that they could see him taking the photos, doing what he was doing, sitting on the bonnet of his car. Yeah. Now, if that wouldn't have got you fired from your fucking job, I don't know what would. Because to be perfectly honest, blowing, if you were an agent, I don't think you were, but if you were an agent and you were to blow your cover like that, waving a big red flag above your head, if these were the local mafia, the local crims, they could easily find out who you were. They could even follow you back. They could take the registration off your car. What if the police got involved and the police started wondering, well, who's this guy and what's he doing, trying to cause trouble with the local mafiosi types, yeah? And then they decide to go and look into your little R&R place and wonder what are all these spooks doing there, yeah? Why would you do that? Right? You by your own testimony, you've got people there who are assassins for the British government, yeah? And you're risking all these people's identities being exposed. You're risking the fact that the wider world outside might find out that this is a safe house, that these criminals might talk to other criminals and other criminal networks, and this information might get out that, that you're up there, Isn't that the exact opposite of what you should be doing, and the way you should be operating? So one has to question whether or not you're a fucking human being right now writing this stuff, because you sound like an imbecile. You sound like a complete imbecile for putting this in your book. Yeah, I have to question why anybody would do this in real life, but then to write about it in a book, Did you also pull your penis out and wave it around at them at the same time, like, hey, look at me? It's about as stupid as that, isn't it, really, Peter? One has to question what is wrong with your head doing that. So
now comes the part where we throw our heads back and laugh. Ready?
Ready!
Peter's strange judgment abilities comes across when he says that there was a gentleman called Wolfie, and that this chap was a German pilot and he was also a intelligence officer. But this guy was being used as an intelligence officer after he was driving along in his car with his family, and he could see a car coming down the road that he was driving on in the wrong direction, so like a one-way street. And rather than pull over for this obviously crazy driver to get past, rather than get out of his way, this guy Wolfie is like, no, I'm not getting out of the way, I'm going to keep on driving. And it's like a game of chicken, he's like, I'm going to drive down this road and this guy is going to get out of my way. The guy that's driving the wrong way at high speed down a street. Bear in mind, you got your family in the car now. So what does this Wolfie guy do? He just keeps going straight on. And bang! Massive car crash. All of his family are killed. His 2 children, his wife are all killed. He's the only survivor. Wow. And Peter goes on to say, oh, this is a really nice guy, nice guy, yeah. And he undertook many dangerous missions, and that's why he got to know him. This guy was active. they keep a person who does that sort of thing active. What, like, he's got a good set of judgment skills then, hasn't he? That's the type of person they want to use, and that's the type of person you use. And Peter sounds like he's looks up to this chap, looks up to him and finds him very interesting. And then, surprise, surprise, Wolfie ends up dead because he had flown the aircraft he was in into a Scottish hillside, killing himself and his 2 passengers. Oh, so everyone went down this time, and it said the accident report simply said pilot error. Yeah, no fucking shit, Sherlock. But this is the sort of person that Peter would consider would be quite suitable to work with as an intelligent agent or a handler. This is the type of person he'd be quite happy to send somebody like that with those sort of judgment skills. Well, I mean, Peter himself sounds like he's got some fucking judgment skills, so perhaps they're all kindred fucking spirits in moron camp. I'm just wondering if maybe Wolfie expected the mountain to get out of the way. Like with his family, when he got his family killed. Maybe that mountain should have got out of his way. He's flying an aircraft. Get out of my way, mountain. Regular brainiacs. Next we go into James Bond territory, because Peter is saying that he was trying to start his car and it seemed like there had been a bomb placed under the bonnet, because he heard a small sort of sound and he got out of the car and then the car exploded. And so Peter says this was an attempt to assassinate him. There is no discussion of whether or not the car was analysed in any way for any types of explosive devices or any chemical substances. There was no investigation into this matter. It's just kind of like, oh well, I got in my car, went to start it, and basically it caught fire and blew up. Yeah, right. So that's them trying to kill you. Now, you might be right, because later on there is something that's a little bit more direct, which I think then you would kind of go, that is somebody trying to kill me.
It's a trap!
Oh, just as an aside, he does say that he was supposed to have had a major brain operation, but he could have lost some use of his faculties if it had gone wrong and been in a wheelchair for life. So he opted not to have the operation. And he says, luckily, he's still fine to this day. I just wonder what that operation was. Was it removal of stupidity and implantation of common sense, perhaps? Maybe you should have gone for that operation, Peter. Now, another gentleman that was staying at this guest house for the spooks that Peter ran was a chap that he used to call X. And X was somebody who worked in the higher echelons of power in either MI5 or MI6. And he was a hitman, basically. Somebody that you could be called upon to assassinate somebody on behalf of the government. But he was a bit of a loose cannon, this chap. He would never open doors, Peter says. He would just kick them in. And I'm just thinking, well, how much was the bill in the MI6 building or the MI5 building? These super highly refined offices which are made in a highly architectural and high aesthetic value of the design that went into these buildings. I wonder how much a door would cost to replace in MI5 every time this guy kicks open the door because he can't be bothered to use a handle. So Peter says, yeah, something doesn't sound right there. I mean, I think they would have probably sacked him somewhere along, like by door 5, door 1, you get like a verbal warning. Door 2 and 3, you're probably on a reprimand. Door 4, you're probably like calling in favours from your friends, the Freemasons, in order to keep your job. I think by door 5, they might have sacked you. just possibly, little bit of a loose cannon here, won't listen to us when we tell him not to kick the doors open, that the handles are to be used to open the doors, and we don't seem to be able to get it through to this guy that actually using doors is a good idea. Anyway, aside from that, back to reality land, Peter seems to think that we'll just accept this as a fucking story, that this is like a normal sort of, yeah, okay, so on Peter goes. So how did X get to even be in a job like that, I mean, sounds like a pretty unhinged bloke. Well, apparently he was in the SAS, so he had like serious training and self-defense. And, well, he was out in Germany in a bar, and this X character had a fight with somebody. But instead of just being a normal fight, he used his lethal abilities to take the man out. So he actually killed somebody. And for this, he was apparently sent to a military prison for 12 years. Okay, and whilst he was in prison, somebody he met was working for the intelligence services and said, "Oh, we could use a guy like you." Of course, somebody with a serious criminal record for basically murder or manslaughter. That's the type of yay. You can come in. You'll be fine, You can come into MI5. I think they probably would have had a problem with his slightly sort of crazy, 12 years in a military prison type activities to allow somebody like that into a job. But hey, this is Paget world, so in Paget world, all sorts of things are possible.
There are some inconsistencies in your story. Like every fucking thing that you said.
Back to Peter's R&R retreat. He was saying that he was now a confidant to people like Mr. X and Wolfie, before he passed away, and he had become their unofficial therapist. Yeah, what, laser treated him and curing him cancer as well, is it? No, but he was listening to them and becoming their shoulder to cry on, and listening to their stories, and but he was helping them to write all their stories down too, putting it all on paper. And then, of course, he did the wise thing, because this is Peter. Peter is very wise, very wise. Peter then tells Her Majesty's government that they're writing their memoirs. Yeah. Smart move, Peter. What a smart move that was. So now the Her Majesty's government know that you're helping them write their secret stories down, and that they're a little bit off the wall in the R&R place. So how do you think that would look, Peter? How do you think that little scenario you got going on there was going to look to those in the corridors of power who didn't want these secrets coming out? How do you think that would look? Don't think about it too long, okay? One of these chaps that was meant to be staying there was claiming that he was involved with the Paris assassination of Princess Diana and Dodi, so, if that was true and they were writing it down in a book, what do you think would come next in terms of what happens to you in your life, Peter? There's one chap reckon the Diana car had its tyres blown out by a small explosive device, and that the tyres were filled with propane so that they would blow out when it was triggered. Well, interesting again, isn't it, that nobody's ever said that the tyres looked like they'd been blown out. But, this chap who says he was part of this Diana death squad was talking about a military-grade strobe flash gun which was used to temporarily blind Paul, who was driving the car with Diana in and Dodi. The thing is, there's no such thing as a military-grade strobe flash gun. I've looked on Google, And, you know, when you've got military surplus sites that sell things that really aren't, you know, like weapons and things. And funnily enough, none of them have got any information about a military-grade strobe flash gun. So is this some sort of exaggeration on your behalf, Peter, or the chap in question? But he was saying that the white Fiat that was being driven, which was supposedly might have come into contact with the car. I remember there was this story about it, and that this was a James Anderson, his name was, and he was a British agent, but British agent posing as being paparazzi and having a job as a paparazzi photographer for a number of years. Yeah, okay, or maybe he just was a paparazzi photographer. One of the other things that really doesn't add up with this guy who's called X, he says that he was used by the Dutch mafia to bump off people in their organisation when they'd been dipping their fingers in the till, you know, like criminals stealing money off their criminal masters. And he said that, you know, as a government agent, he had been employed to put 2 bullets into the heads of the accused whilst they had paper bags over their faces. And it was apparently done in front of the other gang members, and pictures were taken. So hang on a minute now. A government assassin is openly available for hire in order to assassinate for payment. It wasn't like as if he was undercover pretending to be one of these criminals. No, the Dutch mafia paid him, and apparently the going rate is £20,000. £20,000. That's all you have to have a top government assassin from the UK go over to Holland and take out, you know, the Dutch mafia, you know. So it's like dial an assassin, you know, like you can dial a pizza, you can dial an assassin. Hello, is that British government? Yes, I'd like to dial an assassin, please. How much will that cost? And how soon can you get it done? What, this evening? Oh, that's excellent. Oh, how much would that be? £20,000? Oh, that's cheap at half the price. Thank you very much. Yes, I'll see you later on. You know, it doesn't fucking ring true. Why would the British government want to reveal who their head assassin was by sending him out to do something like that? And why would they wish to make themselves openly liable in a murder of 2 people for cash right in front of plain view of a load of mafia people, you know, who, if they all talked and said what they'd seen in that occasion, would have caused a few problems, just maybe a couple of problems, you know, if that had come out. And what I find even more amazing is that this chap says that, well, the money that was gathered for doing these assassinations was sorely needed by MI5 and MI6 because it didn't have a lot of cash. What? 20 grand? 20 grand wouldn't even get you out of bed in the morning if you're these organisations. I don't think 20 grand would even cover some of the doors that this fucking Mr. X kept on kicking in. Yeah, so maybe this was his door kicking fund. You know, 20 grand per hit in order to fix the fucking doors he keeps kicking off.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
So let's recap. We've got this situation where we've got a number of agents who are all writing their memoirs, including Peter, and basically they're living in this R&R place. And what does Peter go and do? He reports it to Her Majesty's government that they're doing this. What do you think happens next? Well, probably Her Majesty's government wants to silence Mr. X and maybe some of the others, maybe even Peter. And how do you think they silence loose cannons in this spook world, yeah, of assassins and things like this, which, you know, probably bollocks, but, you know, let's just play Peter's game, you know. In assassin world, you know, how do they silence somebody who's just about to become a serious whistleblower? Well, of course, they try to assassinate him, don't they? So I think there is some attempt was made, and then this guy realizes that his life's in danger, so hobbles off into the forest, and is never seen again. Peter assumes that he died of hypothermia. Great. Did he send out a search party? Doesn't seem like it. No, so, maybe he's out there still to this day. His rotting corpse somewhere out there, undiscovered, because Peter couldn't be bothered to raise the alarm. And then Peter says, obviously he realises, maybe they might want to disappear him. And if he got disappeared, no one would find me. But that didn't matter because never say die. So, and Peter goes on to talk about being followed and ending up in an underground car park and managing to lose these guys, and then there being a high-speed chase, taking his battery out of his phone so that the thing wouldn't give away his position, but high-speed chases with these guys and managing to escape, only to be picked up again later on. So let's get this straight now. They tried to blow up his car. This guy has disappeared, possibly been taken out, killed. Now Peter's being chased and fearful for his life. So what would you do in this scenario? Yeah, what would you do in this scenario? Would you ditch the car? Would you change your clothing so that you couldn't be identified? And would you leave all identifiable things like your phone and possibly, anything that could be used to trace you? Would you leave all that behind? Well, I possibly would, but what do you think Peter would do? Because obviously he's highly trained secret agent. So what do you think Peter's going to do? Well, of course, Peter goes straight back to his R&R hotel for the spooks. Yeah, because he's got to go and collect his laptop. What? Which is more important? Your laptop or your life? Well, guess what happens when he goes back there? He gets punched out and knocked out. And you'd expect him to kind of like, next thing you know, he'd be waking up in a torture cell somewhere. Or not waking up at all. No, but he wakes up and, surprise, surprise, he's there at the house and there's nobody else with him. I would have been a bit suspicious at this point, wouldn't you? But no, Peter kind of, I seem to have dodged a bullet here. I'll go and get the laptops and I'll go and run away. And of course, Peter jumps in a car, goes to drive away, and doesn't think that they might have put something on the car in order to follow his activities. I think they were interested in seeing if he was speaking to anyone else, if he was feeding information to anyone else. They wanted to see where he was going. Obviously think he's a fucking loose cannon at this point. They're really suspicious of him and his modus operandi, so they're fucking watching him like hawks. But he didn't think to check the car. He didn't think that something like the laptop might have been bugged and might have a device in it so they could track him. He didn't think of any of these things. He's just like, no, let's jump in the car, drive off. Of course, they catch up with him. Another chase ensues. Eventually his really sharp brain that he says he's got with all this focused thinking, that kicks in. He goes, maybe they've put a tracking device on my car. Oh, yes. Yeah, right. So then he finally goes and gets the tracking device off the car. Of course, by this point, we're all going like, he's behind you. Oh, no, he's not. Oh, yes, he is. Yeah, it's like pantomime territory, isn't it, really? According to Peter, he then manages to evade all these people, and by the skin of his teeth, he manages to meet up with somebody who arranges to get him out of the country on a boat. And then he goes from country to country until he settles down for a while. I think it was somewhere in Portugal. So what happens next? Peter has been sunning himself in a location next to a swimming pool out in the middle of nowhere. And his family haven't seen or heard from him in many months, which is just normal behaviour for Peter. We'll come back to that a little bit more later on. And but there he is, having his suntan, and he sees a white Fiat. Poetic sort of coincidence there. A white Fiat drives past the villa, and he can see it quite clearly, and an older gentleman gets out with a GPS and starts kind of looking around like he doesn't know where he is. And then the guy gets back in the car and just sort of sits out there for ages under the tree, and kind of like as if he's doing some sort of surveillance, perhaps. Ah, yeah, right. So this obviously gets Peter interested, and he thinks, oh, what's he up to then? He's not, and as Peter says, he's not very good, is he? Peter says, in other words, the villa was under surveillance from people who were not very good at the game. Like Peter, taking photos of the Romanians in the town square. Look at me, look at me. Sounds about the same. I mean, if this guy was on your level, Peter, he would have probably knocked on the door asking if Peter Paget was there whilst carrying a violin case under his arm. That wouldn't look suspicious at all, would it, Peter? Anyway, Peter's there with an assortment of armament, from sidearms to long-range rifles. And he's just looking after himself, and one day, whilst he's kind of sunning himself, he sees a red laser dot kind of coming on him from a distant piece of the forest, and he ducks out of the way, and then a bullet sails past him into the wall. So Peter now is trying to find this chap in the forest, and whatever, it's like, yeah, whatever. Sounds like fucking boys' own fucking stories to me. But Peter escapes this villa, goes on the run again, and where do you think Peter goes this time? Now, you'll have to think about this one, right? Where would you go if you thought the British government was out to get you? Where would you go that would be probably the best place to be safe from the British government? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? You go back to Britain and you sign on. Yeah, with many of your fake multiple identities, which probably were known to the security services. So now they know you're back in the UK. Is this even real? Okay, so what do you think they're going to do then? Now they would know where you are, and how many of they must have thousands of people who work for the security services in the UK. So they've got all these people on hand to deal with your situation, and they could have taken you out and assassinated you, which is what they do. In Peter world, this is what they do. They assassinate people they don't like, and they've clearly already tried to bomb your car, take you out once, and take you out with a bullet on a second occasion. So they're really after you, aren't they? They really want you dead. So what do they do to Peter when he comes back to the UK? What do? Nothing. They do absolutely nothing. They let him continue to receive his benefit for a number of years, and they basically do nothing at all. The embarrassment factor comes from Peter actually being arrested for claiming multiple benefits under multiple different names, which obviously he had no permission to do. He had no permission to do that. If he's working as a subcontractor for himself, then clearly if he decides to keep multiple identities going, this is his business. It's not the government's business, is it? He says himself, he says, well, I'm a subcontractor. So he's working for himself. So if he has multiple names, multiple identities, multiple passports, multiple bank accounts, yeah? Who told him to do that? Who expected him to do that? Well, maybe it wasn't the government. Maybe he did that himself. So when he got caught and done, nobody from the security services came to help him. And basically, he was hung out to dry, guilty as charged. So it's a completely stupid story, isn't it? I mean, do you think they would just leave him alone if he was that much of a risk? And knowing full well that he was probably going to write a book, yeah, and it might expose all of these things that they didn't want exposed. Yeah, all they do is just get him done for benefits fraud. Yeah, that's definitely the good plan of action. And that wouldn't cause him to tip over the edge and then be, more determined to publish his book, would it? Yes, I think it probably would. So, anyway, if you can believe any of that, there is a book here for you to read. It's called Secret Life of a Spook, and it is wall-to-wall a biggest load of bollocks I've read in my fucking life.
It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal. You get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
And I would imagine that anyone who reads this is probably going to get bored about halfway through, as it is just self-waffle, ego expansion. And if you're going to get it, make sure you don't pay for it, because you don't want any money going back to this guy. Clearly somebody, if they did work for the security services and has done a number of shits on a number of people over the years, including a number of shits which might have led to people's early demise, all outside the auspices of what we perceive to be justice and law. Outside the law, if this was true, it's fucking disgraceful. And I think Peter Paget should be absolutely fucking disgraced for himself for being part of this. And I see no honour in what he did at all. I see no honour. I see nothing but a person, nothing but a psychopath, really. But here's how I sum all of this up. Okay, there's a bit more to the end of the book. I'm not really going to go into any more. I'll have to leave you to read the end for yourself. It's not very exciting, though, I can assure you. But here's how I sum this up. And I've left this kind of analysis to this moment. I haven't put it in the earlier videos because, really, unless you kind of get a flavour for what this man is like and the way his mind is working and the kind of drivel he's writing, to kind of justify his position, I think there's a couple of possible scenarios here. I do not think he ever worked for the security services. There's no way they're going to employ somebody who's a loose cannon like him, who thinks that, he should start banging the table and telling local police officers how to, do their job and all this sort of stuff. It's kind of, no, he's definitely a bit of a loose cannon. I don't think they'd want him in that sort of role. And I can imagine a completely different scenario, which to me would make a lot more sense. I think that Peter may be some sort of confidence trickster, and maybe he has used various personas over the years in order to gain money or rental on premises, and maybe, hiding behind these different identities has become a way of life for Mr. Paget, and pretending to be in the military and pretending to be, a secret agent has curried him favour with the types of people that he's been hanging around. Maybe there is some truth in his saying that he got peppercorn rent, rent for £4 a month for his wife to live in a farmhouse, because he was the right sort of person, to be living in that type of environment, because he was all upper class and yes, that I could possibly believe. I could believe that. But I think the probability is that Peter has just used his skills as a deceiver and somebody who likes to fabricate stories in order to open doors for himself and to put himself in positions that he had no real right to be in. And realistically, I think that considering the amount of women that he's gone through, and in this book, I think that either he gets bored of relationships pretty quickly, or they get bored of him. But one thing that does not come across in this book, and it's glaringly obvious to me, is it's kind of like boys' stories, family. Family get like one line, one sentence. It's very minimal. And then it's more bollocks about being James Bond, and and then family. It's always very, very thin, and I get the feeling from that it seems to give me an idea of the measure of the man seems to be somebody, he doesn't really care about family life. He probably doesn't care about his marriages, and he certainly seems to like the women. And I've had this confirmed to me by people that have been hanging around with him in the last few years, that he is a bit of a womanizer, and he tries to put on oh, look at me, I'm the big old the big old I am, and I can do this and I can do that, and I'm really rich and I can do this, and he does. It's just all part of his act. It's just all part of the act. And what he really wants is to impress women, and this is all about con tricks to get you money, to get you premises to live in, to get you women. It's I think this smells to me of somebody who is just a basic confidence trickster, and almost on what you could call a gigolo, somebody who uses romance and sex as a way to kind of support their lifestyle. He may have been living on the shirt tails of these women, which is the thing that doesn't get written about, you see, because that's the untold story. I'm only guessing. This is a pure guess, but I mean, I have seen in life, I've seen a number of gentlemen live on the shirt tails of quite rich women, that have gathered their money from other means, maybe by a divorce settlement or whatever, but they've got lots of money. And who's the type of person that usually tries to sniff those women out and get in with them? Who would be the type of person who would possibly do that sort of thing? But of course, for some people, even that is just not good enough. All the money, the house, the family, that's just not good enough, because to these people, they want more than that. So sometimes, they're seeking extramarital relationships and affairs. And how do you get to live away from your family, no questions asked, or no evidence offered as to where you've been? Well, how about you can concoct a fucking story that you're some sort of government agent, and that you're, you can't say what you're doing because it's all very secret, yeah? But it enables you to go away for large periods of time. I wouldn't be surprised if Peter Paget has a woman in every port, as the saying goes. And it wouldn't surprise me in the least. Many blokes out there, they would turn to something like Freemasonry in order to be able to get out of the house on 1 or 2 nights a week, you know, to get away from the missus and not be asked any questions about what's going on. Of course, it's a gentleman's only club, so you can't ask any questions. You know, keep the wife at bay. You know, so you can have your little bit of fun. But of course, you can't really do the having a big affair and a relationship with somebody, because it's going to get back, isn't it? It's going to get back to them. You know, so what would you have to do if you wanted to have all these women in different ports and relationships going on all around the place? You'd have to have a number of different names, because you wouldn't want them being able to track you back. You'd have to have different names, you know, and you'd have to have different identities, and you'd have to have all this sort of stuff. And it's like, I think it's far more likely that instead of working for the security service, Peter Paget's been working for the I want to jack off into your vagina service. Yeah, that's what I think's going on, and I'm sorry to be quite rude about it, but I mean, it would add up far more to me that was the truth. And this story here is just a way of explaining away to all the women who might have known him over the years and been married to him. Yeah, it's a way of getting one past them, right over the, you know, the top, whoosh. Yeah, it's a way of getting one over on them, and it's a way of explaining away, you know, his I was a cancer cure man, yeah, who ended up on fucking television being exposed as a fucking fake cancer cure man, you know, as if that wasn't bad enough. Oh no, it was a real cure. It was a real cure. It was yeah. And it's like, and then on it goes, isn't it? Yeah, it's like fucking. Then of course onto the benefits fraud. You know, it's kind of like claiming multiple benefits. You know, you got all this money coming in. Maybe this only touches the tip of the iceberg. Maybe they only caught him for 4 benefits he was claiming in 3 different names. Maybe he's been claiming benefits under multiples names over the years. Yeah? Maybe this is the thing, you see. He's a con artist. He's a con artist. He's not a government agent. He's a fucking con artist. You know? Maybe he's the type of con artist that would steal the last few pennies out of your grandmother's purse. Yeah? But one thing is for certain, yeah? This guy knows how to extract money under false pretenses. Yeah? He knows how to lie. He knows how to fabricate. He's got all the fake identities and fake papers, and it's still not good enough to keep him safe. So how good a fucking secret agent is he? How good is he? Yeah? If he gets caught, yeah, and the security services did not suppress this case. Nobody shut this case down. They hung him out to dry. Seems to me like if he was working for the security services, they would have possibly wanted to suppress the case. Nope. Somebody wants this guy, you know, done, and it's probably for the simple reason. Not because he's a threat to Her Majesty's government and exposing stuff about assassins. The simple thing is he's a threat to Her Majesty's government because he's claiming about fucking 20 or 30 different fucking benefits under about 40 fucking different names, probably. How about that one? You know? I mean, that's where the money comes from for these houses. That's where the money comes from for everything he's doing, yeah? Because he's not fucking working for it, is he? He's not fucking working for it. So where's he getting it from? Yeah? Maybe the simplest answers are closer to the truth. I did actually forget to mention something about Peter's claims of being an alien, so this is a postscript. I'll try and make it short and to the point. Is Peter Paget an alien? I doubt it. It's just another scam, you know, another one of his little scams in order to get people to like him and part with their money. You know, oh, are you? You're an alien. Oh, you can heal me, can you, with your special magic powers? You know, Emperor's new clothes. It's the Emperor's new clothes. He doesn't have to prove he's an alien. How could he prove he was an alien? Can he shapeshift? Can he do anything like that? Can he tell you anything that's real? You know? Well, he's into seances, you know, and stuff. Remember how he said he you know, his dad was a spiritualist and he learned all the tricks from his dad of how to cold read people and how to do that. I think that Peter Paget learnt as a young lad there was a easy way to get money out of gullible people, yeah? And I think he's been using that formula for a very long time. And I think he's been hoodwinking his partners. But the thing is it likely that if he was an alien, that the government would employ him to be their point man investigating UFOs and strange things of that nature, if they knew he was an alien, yeah? And you could imagine if the government knew about aliens in human form, yeah, then they'd probably keep him off to one side and maybe not let him near the UFO stuff. And maybe they'd have to actually be a little bit careful because, you know, surely if you had an alien working for you, you'd have to be really careful not to let them near secret stuff and secret files and you know, maybe not let them have a firearm. And, you know, how far would you trust an alien in your security service? You know, I mean, it's like saying, why don't we just have a Russian, you know? Why don't we just have a Russian guy, you know, work here in the security services? And it's kind of like, well, because we'd have to run him as a double agent, you know, so there'd have to be a clear reason to want to do that. Yeah, you can't run an alien as a double agent back against his home planet, because the whole reason that an alien would be here spying on us, you know, and trying to get one over on us, it's kind of like, hang on a minute, it's taking it too far. It's just too ridiculous. Yeah. So if he was an alien and they didn't know about it, you could understand it, you know. If he was an alien and they didn't know that he was an alien and he was masquerading in human form and doing all of his secret service job, yeah, which I find laughable. But let's just imagine that scenario was true, okay? Then he's written a book about it now. He's written a book saying he's an alien, and he stood on stage and he says he's an alien, and he's telling the world he's an alien, folks, and that he's got two souls and is split down the middle. And now he's telling everybody that he's just been made the director of the North Atlantic Intelligence Group, right? Do you really think that an intelligence organization would allow a man who says he's an alien on stage, yeah, on stage at one of the flakiest UFO conferences on the planet, Miles Johnson's fucking circus, right? Do you think that they would let a person like that head up an intelligence organization? Look at me, I'm a secret spy. Look at me, I have got people killed. Look at me, I'm a loose cannon and I leak information and I write books. Yeah? Oh yes, no problem, Peter. You can become the director of our whole organization, in charge of everything. In charge of all the agents, in charge of all the secrets, you can be the head man. Yeah, you can be the director of the CIA. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, not a problem, mate. Yeah. No. Does not add up. Do not believe it. Yes? It makes no sense. Nobody in one of those positions would trust somebody coming out saying they're a fucking alien. Yeah? And if he is, he must be the stupidest fucking alien on the planet, because he wouldn't be able to be employed by those people anymore because he's just outed himself. But he says, oh yeah, they know what I'm doing. They know what I'm doing, and they've made me the director of the organisation. He was speaking last year at Warminster, telling everybody he was an alien, right? He's spoken this year at Miles's conference, continuing to say he's an alien. And in that time, he's been made the head of the North Atlantic Intelligence Group. No.
Oh, he's a madman! A madman!
Come on, folks. Come on. Yeah? Give yourself a little slap. Are you awake now? Take some deep breaths. Because it helps, the oxygen helps the brain process. Are your eyes open? Do you need to put your glasses on? Right? Come on, folks. Yeah? Use this. He's a con man. Yeah? I don't like having to be the one to say it, but it reeks of it, folks. It reeks of it. Come on. Miles Johnson hasn't got the critical ability to look into this and to call a spade a spade. Miles Johnson just doesn't have the ability. You could tell Miles Johnson that you had 16 octopus tentacles, and that you could impregnate women by the power of thought. Yeah, and Miles will go, yeah, I'll put you on a double DVD and we'll sell your story. Yeah, that Miles Johnson is not the right person to be looking into this sort of information, and I'm sorry to hear that he thinks that I am being a government troll now by doing this, but I'm sorry, Miles. If you can't work this out for yourself, like your low IQ fucking people that watch your videos, right? If you can't work this out for yourself, doesn't say very much, does it? So, I hope I'm wrong. That's all I can say. I hope I'm fucking wrong. But big claims require big proof. So thanks for watching. If any of this were true, Mr. Peter, you can guarantee yourself one thing. There would only be one punishment suitable by the government for you.
Southern perimeter, alert.
Now approaching.
Rest assured that their interests are very much my own, and that anything I can do to maintain the security of the citizens will be my primary objective. Be seeing you.
Team up for the last time. The Olympic is at Southampton, her deck's empty, and for the last time the Blue Peter flutters from her masthead. The old White Star liner is sailing on her last voyage, en route for Jarrow and the shipbreakers, but there is no send-off. She had a wonderful war record, sinking 2 enemy submarines and carrying thousands of troops in safety. They called her the Old Reliable. Now her days are done, and away she goes, reliable to the last. Jarrow, which has suffered as severely as any of the depressed areas from the bitterness of unemployment, is in luck's way at last. And all along the banks of the Tyne, crowds wait to see the Olympic arrive at the end of her last voyage. The 46,000-ton liner is on her way to the shipbreaking yard and brings 18 months' work and £100,000 in wages to the hard-hit town. So the tragedy of the Olympic's last trip becomes a journey of good omen for the Tynesider.